It was May of 1775, a fine misty rain falling upon forest and farm of Austria. The higher elevations of the Alps still held to snow even as spring threatened the pack which would soon swell the trickling mountain streams into roaring flooded rivers. But along the main road which ran from Salzburg through to Vienna, the way was clear for pilgrims, prosperous and poor alike. It was a carriage, fit to carry 6 within, gilded with a golden trim upon the deep blue frame which made the journey to Vienna to visit with one of its most prominent citizens. The lady who lazied against the cushioned seat, dressed in the manner of a woman of some import, sought a remedy to a problem which was not her own, though through institute of marriage she did gain some responsibility for it. The rough ride over the rocky surface might have been far worse had Madame Franstein not taken the liberty of having her maid loosen the constricting corset beneath the ruffled velvet blouse. To keep a semblance of modest, a shawl covered the exposed bosom from the uncouth eyes of the peasantry. Her hands, half covered in the long lacy sleeves, busied themselves with embroidery which Margareta detested but was the only pastime possible in the bouncing vehicle. She should be in Vienna by nightfall, some few hours away. Perhaps this remarkable physician might be able to quiet her discontentment or propose such strategy that would correct the wrong done her and save the family fortune. The unfortunate increase in taxes, as tribute to the depleted war coffers spent in war against the dark heathens from the eastern lands, had taken their toll on many. But it was the ineptitude of her banker husband which drained even more from the great vaults of their estate in Habsburg. The city of Vienna was much renowned for having a great number of savants, both in the arts and sciences. A music prodigy, a quite youthful composer who had writ his first opera at age 8, was in favor with the court. Margareta had heard others try their hand at such music but they seemed destined to fall short. But he was not the reason she'd made the long trip. There was another man, schooled in the mysteries of alchemy and rational thought. His name was Franz Mesmer. The rain became a torrent, rivulets of water pouring off the eaves of the narrow wooden house. It resided between similar structures, set in a row along the cobblestone avenue. The driver was forced by circumstance to park his vehicle some distance away as the small court before the dwelling was filled with a crowd of seekers. Within the house, a tall distinguished man, elder in manner though not yet greatly aged in years, sighed into his spidery fingers. No matter the weather, they always came. Persons from all manner of background. Sick in heart, in spirit, often with the most uninteresting of complaints. He idly brushed a bit of soot from the small fire in his chambers off the modest nightcoat and shook his head. Tell them no more for tonight. Even the most dedicated of physicians must be given some respite to heal himself, chuckled the doctor to his attendant. The youth, acolyte to the master, gave a becoming smile which lightened the gloom. He hastened to do his teacher's bidding and the sounds of argument was heard soon after. But even as the noise of the disappointed mob diminished, Franz found his lovely apprentice returning to deliver a message. There is a lady, stated Hans, and the elder smiled. I hope that you bid her enter. It is a good lesson that you do not keep a lady, young or old, waiting upon the stoop. Is she well groomed in manner and dress? I think so. The dress, almost ruined by the storm, is immaculate in design. I did bring her to the common room to await your pleasure. She is to be addressed as Madame Franstein. From Habsburg, that is what I was told, answered the boy. As with men of learning, his master could be most generous in one moment and quite impossible the next. Hans waited for an indeterminate amount of time while Mesmer twirled his fingers absently in front of him. Go down, lad. Tell them I would be remiss in my hospitality if I did not see the lady after she had made so long a trip to see me. At once, boy, he ordered, laughing at the bounce in the student's step as he hastened to obey. Though nobility and persons of prominence did come from time to time seeking wisdom, they rarely came on solitary missions as Madame Franstein did. The physician hastily drew stockings and short trousers up and hooked the fastenings of his finest waistcoat together. Franz selected the best of his powdered wigs, pulling it down about his unkempt natural locks. He felt more civilized as the man descended the stairs to greet his visitor. She was a mature woman, with strong signs in face and figure of the blushing child she must have been in her infancy. There was also a man's intelligence evident behind the soft feminine eyes. She also showed signs of distress in her posture, even hidden as it was beneath corset and widespread skirt. "Madam, an honor for you to visit my humble office on so terrible a night as this." His smile was one which he had worked hard to perfect. As a doctor, he sought to comfort as well as cure. The humors at work reacted to a kind gesture as much as they did to potions. "I understand that it is a matter of most import which has sent you through such weather to see me." "I do indeed," she returned his smile, hopeful that the man's easy manner reflected a thoughtful and studious nature. "In truth, it is more my husband's problem, but through error and misuse of funds it has become mine as well." "Is he sound in body?" asked the doctor as Hans lit a good many tapers, better to illuminate the room. "His body is as healthy as a man several times his junior, sir. But his powers of deliberation and calculation is another matter. Peter is fair enough in manner and generous to a fault, but his head for figures threaten our household with ruin," she lamented. At this declaration, the learned scholar raised his heavy brows in curiosity. "I do not know what might be done for such a state, not caused by the upset of humors or from bodily injury," he remarked, and his guest shook her head. "I have heard that you have found a way in which a spirit incomplete might be healed. It is a great discontentment with his assigned lot in life, a contrary mind which prevents poor Peter from fulfilling his role as husband and provider," she exclaimed. "I have a thought, dear lady," interrupted Franz. "In actuality, two thoughts as one. I have a session, of my technique as you say, with a patron of mine. He will not object to yet another person joining the circle as I practice my craft. Stay for the ceremony and let this test your determination. If you wish my services, for a fair fee of course, I will return home with you as a visitor to observe and to counsel," he advised, to which the lady eagerly agreed. Franz secured housing for the woman and her servants at the dwelling of a friend. He sent Hans at once to seek permission for Madame Franstein to attend as guest. The gentleman in question, as attentive as he was to the needs of his more comely acquaintances, did not refuse but welcomed the attractive new addition. The manor, just some 3 miles outside the city proper, was home to a noble of great means but who was subject to an illness of a most delicate nature. He loved the ladies perhaps too much. Lord Salbury, a young man still in the prime of age at 27, was given over to periodic spells of melancholy which worried him more than the itching of his privates. "You are too kind to me, Franz." "Who is this lovely image beside you?" gushed the jovial male, his faux blonde wig tilted at a funny angle. He romped as a grand pup would when shown the least of attentions, and it made Mesmer smile. "This is a patient from Hamsburg, Madame Franstein. She wished to benefit from our little get-together, and I knew that you would welcome her." "Indeed. I am completely charmed, my dear woman." Enchanted and privileged by the company, he gently took her hand and barely brushed the gloved back with his rough lips. "I warn you, sir. She is most unfortunately already spoken for, as the band about her finger would show," chuckled the doctor. Salbury joined in the joke and ushered the pair into his home. The room in question was twice times the size of Mesmer's place, decorated for the occasion with 8 plush chairs set round a steaming cauldron in the middle. 9 will not upset the elemental forces, will it, Mesmer? Asked the Lord with a mild caution. His physician patted the shoulder of his patron and answered to the negative. Witchcraft. You are a practitioner, whispered the lady as she observed the queer setting. Franz smiled at this declaration. It is science, madam. The art of animal magnetism by which the body's humors might be drained of illnesses or rebalanced in the case of our host. He become confused, as perhaps your dear husband is, so we adjust the levels of his fluids, lectured the doctor. As the night curtain fell, the 7 guests, both merchant and nobility, gathered for a modest feast and good conversation. In all, the persons were pleased that a new face would be among the participants. You will simply love it, my dear, exclaimed a plump woman whose husband and brothers were officers in the Austrian army. Her malady was an excess of food and wine which now resulted in the most painful gout. The mixed group of men and women took their seats about the steaming pot, a wondrous scent rising from same to calm the mind of all present. Let us evoke the forces of fire, water, earth and air as we proceed. All will take hold of the stirring rods and follow the example of your partners, commanded Mesmer in a soothing, gentle voice. Margareta found herself captivated by the movement of the scientist's lips, the casual gestures of his strong hands as he uttered some strange phrases in Latin. She saw, as from a distance, her companions relaxing as he went from person to person, whispering long and low into their ears. As Mesmer reached Franstein, he quietly asked her to allow the disquiet in her body to flow into the cauldron through the wooden rod she held. Marvels of marvels, a sensation of comfort, like a warm blanket, enveloped her. She could not help but smile as a pleasant drowsiness fell over the woman. But this was not her time, and Mesmer passed on to stand behind the inflicted plump lady. You find the pain leaving you, traveling out through your hands, down the stirring stick and into the boiling water to be purged. When I finish my evocation, you will find the swelling gone and feeling return to your afflicted limbs. The lady, susceptible to his will after so many sessions, did look a world better. Her cramped fingers unfolded and the distress vanished from her face. Franz only smiled and went along the circle to the others, giving each a word of comfort and encouragement. As with the first subject, all experienced a vanquishing of their specific trauma. Margareta was properly impressed by such mastery over human misery. As Lord Salberry bid them goodbye, she placed a small bag of gold coins into Mesmer's hand. Will you come with me? Help my husband, if you can? She asked. I will do as you bid, dear lady. I will make no promises but to try, he answered. They made the journey to Hamsburg, the doctor astride his own mount. As they approached the Franstein estate, Franz cautioned the woman. Say nothing of your intent or my true identity. Say instead that I am a cousin of a cousin, long away from our homeland. It will explain my education and peculiarities. As the carriage arrived at the front door, a fit but flighty man, sturdy with a beanpole body which put Salberry to shame in activity. My love, my darling. You are just in time for tea. Cook has made the most amazing pastries you will ever taste. Your trip to Vienna was nice? The cut of his long streaming coat was soft and burgundy in tone, the stockings and shoes a queer shade of rose. Peter paused in his speech to stare for a moment at the stranger upon the horse beside his wife's transport. You bring a guest to our house. How lovely a surprise. Bring him inside and let the man rest himself. Mesmer dismounted from his mare and smiled comfortingly at the look of loving concern in Margareta's eyes. He had the seed of a notion in the back of his brain, waiting for further evidence to bring forth a hypothesis into full bloom. The house was fine, but just a few servants in sight, too little to manage with great efficiency. After securing his modest luggage within the guest room, Franz wandered into the sitting room. He found Peter seated at a small table, the unfinished bit of his wife's embroidery in his hands. "My wife is not too efficient at this," explained the man, his own fingers moving the needle to and fro across the framed fabric. "She does not have the confident hand that you do?" countered the doctor, and his host gave a self-deprecating laugh. "It calms me when I am troubled," confessed Peter. His guest did note the fair skin of the man, relatively unblemished by pox nor touched by but a slight growth of facial hair. Though a few wrinkles lined about eyes and mouth betrayed the 37 years, the entirety reflected a youthful appearance. "Are you troubled, sir?" requested the physician, affecting the soothing voice he used so often. Franstein frowned at the question but braved a response. "It worries my wife that I have not acted with responsibility in money matters. When my only brother died some years ago in war, it fell upon me to do the proper thing. I was required to carry on as did all the men in my family. But it seemed that I am not the strong one. Margareta is perhaps stronger than I, and it shames me," he confessed, not knowing the power of Franz's voice compelled him to. "Let yourself become calm, Peter. You will find that things will work out for the better. When I tell you, the ill humor will settle and you are to find a pleasant glow to your surroundings. Awake and see this, remembering none of our conversation," commanded Mesmer with the gentlest of tongues. Just as he ordered, the man awoke and smiled with a lightness of soul. "Your husband believes that he is not suited for the job that family and form has given him," lectured the doctor to his employer as they strolled in the garden. "You can correct this aberration?" she demanded in almost a begging voice. "You have been attempting to square the books, madam?" asked Franz, and Margareta blushed. "I have a knack for numbers, among other things." But Peter had found me with pen in hand. He became quite upset and told me that this was man's work. She cried, and the scientist took her hand in his. "I knew you had a brave heart when you came with no escort to see me in Vienna. What you tell me now, and the talk I have had with your husband allows me to reach a conclusion," he told her with confidence. "What will you do to correct this wrong in both your lives?" demanded Mesmer. "I want his confusion to go, sir. I want our finances to balance as well as our marriage," she answered. Franz squeezed the hand in comfort. "It will be perhaps of less sacrifice than you think, but you must do all that I say. Once done it will be difficult to reverse," he warned. It was a week of observation by the physician to be absolutely sure. He noted at play, whether archery or croquet, Peter was inclined to hold back. There were 2 banquets at which Franz found the intimate discourse between the banker and his friends was of a lighter nature than that between men. With an almost coy flourish, Franstein might dismiss matters of state and war to focus upon the gossip in the courts. But it was his close familiarity with the ladies, almost as sisters, that Dr. Mesmer knew that he had guessed correctly. As part of his ploy, he suggested a demonstration of the mystic arts he'd picked up in his travels to Asia Minor. Only a parlor game, but it would require 6 of the Franstein's closest associates and kin. Margareta did brief the co-conspirators, confessing her concerns. Knowing of the family's troubles, it did not take but a little coaxing for all to agree to her plan. "We evoke the elements of air, fire, water and earth. Now to close the circle," declared Mesmer as the aide held to Thea stirring rods around the boiling cauldron. The approaching night outside dimmed the room until only the luminescence from the fire reflected off the pale and powdered faces. As with the guests of Salbury, the scholar went from person to person and spoke in calming tones to them. It would be of utmost importance that once the deed was done, all concerned would do all in their power to keep Peter from harm of disclosure. Already, Margareta had enlisted her allies to change documents and participate in the lie which would enable the ploy to work. For his part, Franz stopped before Peter and smiled confidently. "You have felt so constricted in your life. The key is in the rough form which God had given you. Coarse hands which are ill-suited to the delicate things you enjoy. Look at your wife, so fine in figure and genteel in manner. You love her, though not in the gross lustful way that men look upon the fairer sex. You perhaps lust after that which makes her womanhood complete," he suggested to the sleepy man. "I do envy her freedom to laugh naturally, to enjoy life in all its diversity without fear of contradiction. Perhaps even the very nature of her kind which creates such a joy from fulfilling her duties as wife and woman." "Is that wrong of me?" asked the drowsy voice of Peter. The doctor smiled with comfort and shook his head. "You are sick from that which nature has forced upon you. But if you trust me, we might draw it from you. Think of all the conflicts of your gender. Allow them to escape through your fingers and into the warmth of the stick in your hand. Think of all that gives you pleasure. The finer sensations with which you associate so closely. They are yours to embrace, if you let them," coaxed the medic. "I do embrace them," answered Peter, feeling a lightness of spirit as he had never felt before. It was as if he was newly born, awaiting the final form that the Almighty chose to give shape to. At this naked expression of contentment, Madame Franstein and company broke the circle and took the trembling happy Peter into their loving arms. October of the same year, Franz sat by the comfort of his modest fireplace, a glass of ale to keep the chill of the coming winter away. Hans was away on errands and had issued harsh instructions to the seekers that his teacher was resting from a bout of fever. It was thus a surprise and annoyance that there came a rude knock upon the front door. He hastily wrapped a cloak around him and issued a few choice curses in Greece as the sick man descended the narrow stairs. Ready to dress down the intruders into his privacy, Franz experienced a rush of pleasure when in throwing open the door he found the Fransteins upon the stoop. The glowing couple was quite different from the stiff man and woman who had come seeking help so many months before. The husband looked handsome in a light brown coat, tan breeches and white stockings. While clean of cheek, he was the very picture of masculine confidence. His wife, lovingly attached to his elbow, smiled with a demure manner at the savior of their marriage. She wore a restrained but lovely layer of powder and rouge, dressed in sky-blue bodice and full-flowing skirt, upheld by several petticoats beneath. A large but immaculately polished hand reached out toward the doctor and he bowed over it. "Petrina and Marcus, it is an honor that you come to see a humble physician such as I. All is well back in Hamburg, I would hope," he asked with an easy banter. "Just fine, sir. Much thanks to your cure. I do not recall the exact nature of the potion given, but all is the very image of contentment," gushed the unusually deep but quite feminine voice of the woman. It was in accordance with Mesmer's plans that Margareta would remember her former sex just enough to avoid the embarrassment of discovery. But she was delighted in the masculine image that Franz had allowed her to see. Strong limbs and rigid body as well as appropriate manhood. It was illusion that she would supply false codpiece so to fool the rest of her peers. But Peter was complete in her belief that she was the wife to Marcus. Refined and responsible in her woman's duties, devoted to making her husband content. The estate had been transferred into Marcus Franstein's name with complete power of attorney. It was understandable that Peter would go on holiday out of Austria, perhaps to escape the mounting debts. Under the careful guidance of Marcus, the money began to flow once more. It was the help of the conspirators that Marcus and Petrina now returned from foreign lands to assume responsibility of the family fortune, be welcomed into society. A devoted staff of servants, given to strictest confidence of the ruse, kept Petrina safely convinced that what she saw, a mature and lovely female complete, was the truth. "So we give the balance of your fee to you, kind sir," declared the light but strongly masculine voice of Marcus as into Mesmer's palm was delivered a generous stipend. They conversed for a while on unimportant matters and Franz smiled at his acolyte. An idle thought drifted in his mind. With the success of this experiment, might it not be used to other means?